If you could get the answer to any question, what would you ask? For me, I'd ask this: are we alone? The concept of aliens and extraterrestrials is one that has captured the imaginations of people for thousands of years. The earliest depiction of extraterrestrials in fiction comes from the ancient Greek writer Lucian. In his 2nd century satire, A True Story, Lucian describes himself as having gone to the moon traveling in a ship sent by a waterspout. There, he meets an assortment of aliens who happen to be at war with the people who lived on the sun. Since then, aliens have been a feature of countless stories and are now an inextricable part of our collective culture. If you take the top 10 highest grossing films of all time, 60% of them feature aliens in some capacity. Today, we're going to explore the history of aliens as they have appeared on film from the early 20th century all the way up to the present. This is the history of aliens in film. The earliest depiction of extraterrestrials on camera came in 1902's A Trip to the Moon. In the film, a team of astronomers build a bullet-style spaceship and yeet themselves to the moon out of a giant cannon. There they meet the Selenites, wacky aliens named after Selene, the ancient Greek goddess of the moon. As you might expect, our human visitors immediately kill their king and then take one back to Earth and parade the intelligent, sentient creature around like the cruel bastards we are. There isn't much to say about their design. They're humanoids, which makes sense given the limitations of the time, both physically and intellectually. It would take a long time before writers would take evolution into account when coming up with aliens. For instance, this was how Star Trek explained why all of their aliens looked very humanoid.
Our scientists seeded the primordial oceans of many worlds, where life was in its infancy. The seed codes directed your evolution toward a physical form resembling ours. This body you see before you, which is of course shaped as yours is shaped.
Obviously, this was due to budget constraints more than anything, and people are just able to connect with humanoid aliens more so than non-humanoid ones. There's a reason the aliens in Avatar are perfect furry off material and not Jabba the Hutt. With all of that in mind, it's easy to forgive A Trip to the Moon's relatively simple aliens. I will say they did do a few things to differentiate them. They're striped, they have neat masks, and they have Zoidberg claws. The next time an alien would appear on film would come a year later in the 1903 New Zealand short film, A Message from Mars. This film is unfortunately one of countless that are as of today lost to time, so I don't have anything to show you, although this image can be found on the film's IMDb page. The film would be remade a decade later in 1913, and it features a Martian visiting Earth at Christmas time to teach a selfish man to be a better person by turning him invisible and showing him how much his friends and family think he's an asshole. So basically just a Christmas Carol, but with an alien instead of a ghost. The Martian is dressed in ornate robes and has magical powers like teleportation, but is otherwise just a human. So this film is a remake of a movie that was based on a play that was a retelling of A Christmas Carol. I don't want to hear y'all complaining that all of our movies are remakes or adaptations nowadays. This has been going on literally since the beginning. Even the next film known to feature an extraterrestrial after 1903's A Message from Mars was a remake. It was 1908's Excursion to the Moon, a remake of 1902's A Trip to the Moon. In this one, the Selenites look way less cool. They're basically just in pajamas with space-related shapes on them, but they're more jumpy, which is kind of interesting. After this, we would get 1910's A Trip to Mars, a Thomas Edison short film in which a man invents anti-gravity powder and uses it to float to Mars. There, he meets a giant demon-like alien who can blow freezing breath. His design is still pretty clearly humanoid, but the fact that they made him so big makes him a very unique alien thus far. After 1913's A Message from Mars, we would get another A Trip to Mars in 1918, this time in the form of a Danish film that features some very Baroque-looking aliens. A year later, we would get the first feature-length sci-fi film ever, The First Men in the Moon, an adaptation of the H.G. Wells novel of the same name. This is another film thought to be lost, though in this production still we can see these really interesting bug-eyed looking moonmen who were also referred to as Selenites. A year after that, in 1920, we would get Algol, a German film about an alien from the planet Algol. Despite being unique in that he's the first alien from a location outside of our solar system to be featured in a film, he basically just looks and acts like a weird human, though he can teleport, which seems to be somewhat of a recurring theme so far. In 1922, we would return to Mars in The Man from Mars, which doesn't have a viewable print currently. This would be followed by Alita, a Soviet-era film that also brings us to Mars. Again, they're just humanoids, but their costumes are definitely the most extravagant thus far. They also greet one another by dabbing, apparently, which is notable, I guess. It would take 6 years before film saw another extraterrestrial, and they would come in Just Imagine, again as Martians. These Martians are just humans in weird costumes once again, though notably every Martian is a twin, which is interesting. No aliens would grace the silver screen for another 6 years, until the classic 1936 sci-fi serial Flash Gordon. Flash would engage with a number of aliens. They're all humanoid as far as I can tell, but there are some designs that would be fairly unique for the time.
Well, you better make me invisible again, Doctor. Might come in handy when we take those power magazines to the ship.
From then on, throughout the 1940s, the sci-fi serial would reign supreme, giving us the likes of Gordon, Buck Rogers, Superman, and more. We would also get 1943's Munchausen, where the characters take a hot air balloon to the moon, where they meet some very silly looking humanoids. One's just kind of draped in leaves, and the other is a disembodied head. I actually really like the look of the moon in this one, and they do some really cool trickery with the head. Definitely feels ahead of its time in a lot of ways. By the time 1950 rolled around, the serials of the 40s and 30s transitioned into the iconic sci-fi B-movie, beginning with 1950's rocket ship XM, in which a team of explorers reach Mars to find that the Martians had destroyed themselves in nuclear war in the past, and all that remained were some highly primitive humanoids. We would return to Mars a year later in Flight to Mars. This time, the Martians are just normal humans in silly costumes. The women get to be dressed in short skirts on account of the film was made in the 50s. Later that year, we would get the iconic The Day the Earth Stood Still, which features an alien that's just a human in a suit, and The Man from Planet X, which features a more unique-looking alien that's still ultimately humanoid, but it's by far one of the least human-looking so far, I guess. Kinda looks like actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf. That same year, we also get The Thing from Another World, which features kind of a boring, brutish humanoid. For the next few years, aliens would continue to be primarily humanoids, but we eventually start to get, for the first time, aliens that aren't just costumed humans. Starting with 1953's It Came from Outer Space, which is just such an awesome movie title. The alien here is a really weird, hairy, cycloptic fella that's, as far as I can tell, the first alien that's obviously not humanoid. So it took 51 years since the first aliens to appear on screen before a non-obvious humanoid showed up. After that, we'd get Phantom from Space's alien, which is just a man in a suit, and then Robot Monster, which is just a man in a gorilla suit with a helmet. I freaking love this one. I wonder if it's Rich Evans in there. After Robot Monster, we'd get the iconic adaptation of War of the Worlds, which is finally a second relatively unique alien design. It's kinda humanoid-esque in that it has 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head in the same place, but its RGB face and suction cup fingers make it relatively unique in the history of film up to this point. 1954 would bring us a slew of humanoids, starting with Devil Girl from Mars and the hilarious bug-eyed weirdos from Killers from Space. 1955 would bring us the Quartermass Experiment, where we would see a man turn into a creepy squid-like alien. This Island Earth, the subject of 1996's Mystery Science Theater 3000 the movie, took us back to the humanoid realm, but they gave him a massive wrinkly brain, which I'm sure he used to kill our human heroes. Oh no, he melts. Bye!
Welcome back. Our next guest has been teaching the world to cook for over 20 years, but apparently my wife hasn't been listening.
Oh, funny.
I will destroy her!
From here on out, there are just way too many movies to go through all of them, but we can see a clear shift from the overwhelming majority of aliens being humanoids to more bizarre creatures. Sci-fi B-movies were a dime a dozen in the latter half of the 50s and throughout the 60s, so we'll go through some of the more interesting ones. 1956's Invasion of the Body Snatchers featured some weird pods, but no on-screen aliens. It Conquered the World gave us this amazing cone man who may be the greatest alien of all time. We really let this guy conquer the world. Japan's Warning from Space featured these awesome starfish cyclopses.
The Earthlings must be stopped.
I agree. 1957's 20 Million Miles from Earth saw humanity grapple with a stop-motion lizard man. That same year, we'd get a floating brain with eyes, a weird spidery guy who kinda looks like a facehugger from Alien, and a weird blob of garbage in Quartermass 2. 1958 would give us The Blob, which was a weird blob that grew when it ate things. We'd also get some more humanoids, like the guys in I Married a Monster from Outer Space and It's the Terror from Beyond Space, a film about an alien hunting down people on a spaceship. Sound familiar? Man, movie titles were just so much cooler back then. We'd get another creepy eye guy in The Trollenberg Terror and a creepy mouse spider in The Angry Red Planet. We'd mostly get a long run of humanoids for the next few years, though I don't think I can not mention the 1961 film Nude on the Moon, which features aliens that are just topless women. My kind of planet, am I right, fellas? From there, we'd occasionally get some interesting aliens like this one-eyed dinosaur in Journey to the Seventh Planet and the Creeping Terror's weird plant thing. We'd get another adaptation of The First Men in the Moon, where we're treated to a giant Ray Harryhausen caterpillar. Things would keep pretty steady throughout the rest of the 1960s for the most part, featuring either weird monsters or some kind of humanoid or another, though I do want to talk a little bit about how aliens are portrayed in 1968's 2001: A Space Odyssey, my favorite film of all time. Like Body Snatchers and 1959's Invisible Invaders, we don't actually get to see any of the aliens. Even still, 2001 is my favorite interpretation of what an alien species whose intelligence far surpasses our own might look like. They wouldn't be a giant blob or a plant monster or a humanoid with a giant brain. Like an ant that wanders into your house, we probably wouldn't really be able to comprehend or understand what exactly we were dealing with. The aliens in 2001 are instead a looming, unseen presence whose motives and abilities are virtually indecipherable. I don't want to get into it too much because I think it's worth experiencing spoiler-free, but the brief looks we do get into what these entities are capable of are fascinating to me. The 70s would see a lot of aliens in Godzilla movies and a few humanoids here or there, but nothing too unique or different than had come before it, that is, until 1977. Up until this point, most films would feature one, maybe two alien species. However, Star Wars took that convention and blew it up in a galactic proportion, and audiences loved it, with Star Wars becoming the then highest grossing film ever. We were treated to what felt like a buzzing, thriving universe, packed to the brim with many different kinds of creatures. While the vast majority of what we see in Star Wars were humanoids, the sheer variety, as seen in the famous Cantina sequence, was something audiences had never experienced up to that point. 1977 would also give us Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which saw, as far as I can tell, the first appearance of the classic gray alien. In 1979, we got another classic film about aliens, Ridley Scott's Alien. I mean, words can't even begin to describe how groundbreaking this film was relative to any comparable film that had come before it. I mean, just the look of the alien is simply second to none. It's still something mostly familiar in that it has 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, a mouth, etc., but its design and execution remain the bar for alien monsters. 1980 would give us another Star Wars film in The Empire Strikes Back, where a few new alien types are sprinkled in. Again, their designs are somewhat familiar, with the Tauntaun, Wampa, and Yoda looking like something that may have come from Earth's evolutionary tree, but it's fine.
Mine, or I will help you not.
In 1982, we finally meet Spielberg's lovable E.T., which would once again prove how much audiences like these kind of movies, with the film knocking down Star Wars as the world's highest grossing film. Also in 1982, we would get another iconic alien film, John Carpenter's The Thing. This is definitely one of the most unique aliens put to screen yet. We don't even know what its original form is. It's able to take the form of other living creatures and uses that ability to wreak havoc and manipulate its victims. Even though its original form is unknown, some of the variations that we see in the film are simply amazing and unique. 1983 would bring Return of the Jedi, giving us more aliens than ever before. Most of them are classic 2 arms, 2 legs, and a face like usual, but again, the sheer variations in design keep things interesting. The 80s would go on to give us many more alien films, some as sequels and remakes like Aliens and The Blob, and other more original concepts like Predator and The Abyss. We'd see this renaissance continue into the 90s, with the overwhelming majority of notable films being sequels like Predator 2 and Alien 3, and adaptations like Men in Black, Contact, and Starship Troopers, though there would be some original films like Independence Day and The Fifth Element. Contact is another one like 2001, where I appreciate the fact that the aliens don't have a form that we can easily understand and connect with. The 2000s would give us more alien films than even the 80s, though this can be partially attributed to low-budget filmmaking technology becoming more readily available. At this point, there are just so many notable movies that feature aliens. Again, it's just a genre that continues to captivate people more and more. Beginning in 1999, we'd get another set of Star Wars films that would introduce a number of relatively unique aliens, though mostly humanoids. Aliens would start to become more common in animation, beginning with Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius's Weird Egg People and Disney's Lilo and Stitch. Aliens would become common features of superhero films at this time as well, with Spider-Man 3 and Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Original films wouldn't be completely lost, with films like Signs, Cloverfield, and District 9 handling the genre in unique ways. The highest grossing film of all time to this day, James Cameron's Avatar, would release in 2009, sending shockwaves throughout Hollywood for only a couple of years, really? The 2000s would see remakes and adaptations of classic sci-fi standards like Spielberg's War of the Worlds, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Star Trek. Still, throughout all of these, the aliens are still pretty familiar. Even the non-humanoid ones still had features that we can recognize and connect with pretty closely. The 2010s would bring us more films with aliens in them than any other decade to date. Like with the 2000s, the overwhelming majority of films here would be adaptations and sequels. We'd get a prequel to The Thing titled The Thing. We'd get 2 prequels to the Alien series in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. We would also see the Marvel Cinematic Universe take to the stars, beginning with 2011's Thor and culminating in 2019's Avengers Endgame. We'd also get another set of 5 Star Wars films. The 2010s would also feature a slew of original films like 2011's Paul, Del Toro's Pacific Rim, and 2018's A Quiet Place. Most aliens in the 2010s remained humanoid, or again, were given relatively familiar features, though there have been a few that take things in interesting directions. I love everything about the aliens in 2016's Arrival, from their physical designs to how they communicate, as well as their more fantastical characteristics. 2018's Annihilation and 2019's Color Out of Space took things in strange directions as well, both channeling H.P. Lovecraft in their own ways. And so we've reached the 2020s. Most notable films featuring aliens are adaptations or sequels like the Sonic the Hedgehog films A Quiet Place Part 2 and Dune, though aliens can be found in some original films like The Tomorrow War and Don't Look Up. Perhaps due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the rate of films featuring aliens has been slower than in the 2020s, but there's no doubt that aliens continue to play a huge role in our culture. Whether they're our friends or our enemies, aliens in film have captured the imaginations of billions of people.
But look at all the hunky boys.
I do not care for hunky boys. Or do I?
Do you think humanity will ever meet another race of intelligent creatures? Are there any out there at all, even, or are we just some weird cosmic fluke? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to let me know what are your favorite aliens in film. Did I miss a really cool alien? Let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing as well. Thanks for watching.